Good morning. I am Chris Fox. Welcome to day 5 of the 21-day novel challenge. I'm a little bit tired today. So, every other Thursday, I go out and I hang with some friends and we play a role-playing game called Pathfinder. And that means that I don't get home until about 10:30 at night. So, last night I wasn't asleep until probably 11. And normally I'm in bed by like 8:30 or 9. So, as you can see, I am slightly tired today. I know that you were jealous of my hair, and that's okay. It's totally okay. It's natural to be jealous of beautiful hair like this. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. So normally I launch right into the recap. I'm skipping that today, and we are going to do 5 or 6 minutes on plotting and outlining, and I'll show you some of the changes that I've made to the documents as we started. So you'll get a look at that. Because today's video is going to be long, I'm going to cut it there. We will jump right into outlining. Okay, so take a look between the two versions of this document. So you will notice that this, on the left-hand side here, is the document that you were sent out. This is what you had the link to. And you can see it's considerably less complicated than what is in the right-hand column here. And that's what I did yesterday. So one of the questions that I've gotten repeatedly is, Chris, in 5,000 words per hour, you say that you're supposed to know what you write first. Why are you dramatically altering your outline if you've already pre-written it beforehand? So why is it necessary for such a large degree of change? And the answer to that is any story that I have written evolves over time. As I get to know the characters and I consider the universe and I look at the implications of things that happen in the scenes that I write, it makes me consider the story more holistically. If you have read the article that I put up, and we'll put a link in the video notes to this article, it's Dungeons & Dragons and Reader Psychology. There are 3 types of players that I've dealt with during my time as a GM. And the third type of those players is simulationist. And those are the people who need everything to be logically consistent. And that's kind of me. I love the narrative, but I also need things to be logically consistent. So as I flesh things out, I need to modify the story to deal with any gaps in logic so that it will be consistent. And that's kind of what happened here. So we'll plunge into some of the specific changes that I've made, but I just kind of wanted to give you a good look between the two. Now we're going to go into some of the specific changes that I have made to the outline and why I made them. So in a previous video, I believe it was day 4, we discussed dropping in chapters for Catherine. And I was doing that because when I look back to my major plot arcs, which are everything when building plot, I felt that the Admiralty plot arc was not being done justice. I've taken that one step further, and this is more of a cross between Admiralty and Human versus Tigress. And I've added another point of view character, and that's going to be Fizzgig. So Fizzgig is the enemy captain. It's a Tigress captain of great renown. She is old and respected, and a powerful war hero. And she's dispatched to hunt down our heroes. So what you start to see through her perspective is her having a hard time following the Johnston and gradually coming to understand that, wait a minute, maybe they're not the true enemy. So this gives us a reflection both into Tigress culture, which I think is neat for the reader. It does flesh the universe out, but it also reveals that their government is also being manipulated. So you're seeing from Catherine's perspective that the Void Wraith are manipulating the humans, and from Fizzgig's perspective, that they are manipulating the Tigress. And that allows me to do things, introducing those 2 plot lines, to greatly increase tension. So to give you an example, I had a chapter where the Johnston was going to leak the information about where the Void Wraith fleet was being built. So they find the system, it's near the end of Act 2, they know that the Void Wraith are there and that they have to stop the Void Wraith, but they can't do it by themselves. And they're on the lam from their own government and from the other governments. They're fugitives, so they can't get any help that way. So what they decide to do is just kind of broadcast their location. And I think that was good, but after creating both of those other points of view, it allowed me to make it much more nuanced. So instead, you see them first leak to the humans what's going on, which allows me to give Catherine's reaction and show what the Admiralty is doing. And then they go and they bait Fizzgig and the Leonis Pride, so that I get to see their reaction. So then we, see what Fizzgig says as well. So what was one chapter is now four, and this isn't bloating the narrative so much as it is fleshing it out, because over those 4 chapters, you're going to see the tension ratchet up in every scene, which is exactly what I'm going for. So it serves the purpose of making the book as long as I want it to, while also allowing me to deepen the tension, which is what really is going to keep the reader turning those pages. Beyond that, you can see that I have added many, many more chapters. What I did is I looked at the kind of broad strokes that I'd created. So I'd have maybe a paragraph about roughly this is going to happen. There's going to be a battle at the end of the book. And now I've actually plotted out what that battle will be, and some of those battles are 4 or 5 or even 6 chapters, and all that stuff is now fleshed out. And the good news here is we are up through Old Flame. So roughly half of our outline has been done, and I'm sitting at around 20,000 words. Now that means that if I continue to write at the pace that I'm writing, I'll probably get at least 20,000 more in these chapters, and I've added a few chapters back here that aren't done yet, so you're going to get some more words there. So I think I can easily get this to be a minimum of 50 on the first pass, maybe as long as 55. And then what tends to happen with my drafts when I go back and rewrite is I add a lot more description. So usually my drafts get longer, not shorter, when I edit. And hopefully that'll take us up over 60,000 and somewhere close to the 70,000 that was the initial target. So that's kind of what I've done. You'll see more about plotting in the future. We will have a video where I go through all of book 2 and sort of how I do that from scratch. But I want to take you through each step of plotting. And as you can see, plotting is not a one and done kind of thing. It's not a, you lay out the outline and that's the outline. It's you do it in stages and then that changes over time. So I want to talk a little bit about structure and plotting, because the number one question that I'm getting so far is about outlining. So if you look at my files here, you've seen that I do have an outline with basically most scenes mapped out, and I imagine that this far in the series you're starting to get an idea that I gradually break these scenes up into 2, sometimes 3, and so this kind of changes as I go along, and I think that's clear to everybody. And you'll see more of that as we go through the challenge. But what isn't clear is how I go from this to that list of files. When you just have an Act 1, an Act 2, and an Act 3, and all you've basically got is a general idea of what your research matter is, how do you go into plotting? How do you know what needs to go where? So I start with the ending. Now this ending may ultimately change, and change a lot. Parts of this won't make it, parts of it will be completely different, but by having an ending, I now know what I'm working towards, and that's critical. You have to know where you're trying to go. So that's point 1 in the plot. After that, you've got to have your protagonist. So if you don't have a protagonist, then the reader really doesn't know who to root for. The sooner you know who that person is that you want them to root for and who your readers are most strongly going to empathize with, the better. So for example, if you look at one of the fantasy classics, The Wheel of Time, Rand al'Thor is your protagonist. And he is what keeps the bulk of readers with that series. So people like other characters, but you got to have that pillar that anchors them in the series initially, and that's what I come up with next. And I've got my ending, and I've got my protagonist. Now I need an antagonist, and this is going to vary depending largely on what you're writing. If you're writing science fiction, it could be an enemy race. If you are, writing romance, there may not really be an antagonist. There can just be some circumstances that come up, or if there is a protagonist, maybe it's an ex-boyfriend, an abusive ex-husband, depending on the plot. The point being, you need something that's going to provide conflict with the protagonist. So in this novel, my main antagonist is going to be Admiral Mendez, but he's acting as a front for the Void race. So the alien race is ultimately the antagonist. Once I had those pieces, I started plotting backwards. So how are we going to get to this ending? When none of the rest of this file existed, I had to ask myself, how do I get to the ending? And so I started thinking about it, and you look at the motives for your hero. What do they want? And how are they going to react by circumstances changing? And then you look at the motives for your antagonist. And what that antagonist does is going to impact the character, and your plot is going to come from the interactions between the opposite goals that the antagonist and the protagonist want. They can't both have what their goal is. So they're going to come into conflict, and by the end of the book, one of them is going to come out on top. So then I give them a starting point. In the case of my aliens, they have some very nefarious goals, and they are harvesting human colonies, and no one knows why. So they want to keep harvesting people, and my protagonist wants to stop that from happening. So you've got the commander of the Johnston trying to stop this plot to wipe out human colonies and to unravel the mystery of who the enemy even is. And so all I had to do is figure out where he was at the start of the book, start figuring out the actions that the Void Wraith would take, which colonies they were going to hit, and then it told me sort of how I would get from where the book started to its ending. Because I have to plant pieces where the protagonist is gradually uncovering clues as to who this enemy is, and then also have them butt heads against the other characters that I'm creating. So when doing my world building, I figured out who were the major races in this galaxy, and that allowed me to figure out what the conflict could be between them. So I have a multi-layered conflict. First, you've got the protagonist and the antagonist, and then you have a third and a fourth faction that are going to kind of throw sparks at different points in the story. I realize that this is high-level conceptual stuff, and I think it'll be helpful when you see how I put this into play in the next plotting video, which will probably be me creating the document for the second book in the series and starting to plot it out and give you a better idea of how that works. Okay, let's do the recap portion of this video. So today was extremely difficult. I really struggled to get my words out. I'm very, very tired. I didn't want to write today at all. But this is where discipline comes in, folks. You make yourself do what you need to get done. So it's about 10:30 a.m. I pushed myself really hard this morning. I didn't want to do these words, but I made it happen. So I am at 24,782 words. That means that I am a little over 200 words shy of where I should be. I could crank that out with another sprint, but I figure I'll make it up tomorrow and get back on task. Anyway, without further ado, let's take a look at the sprints from today. Okay, so you can see that even though I was really tired today, my words per hour were still on track, but the individual sprints were much shorter. I mean, I had one that was only 191 words and just a few minutes long. So there were 7 total sprints today. None of them topped 800 words, which is unusual for me. But given how tired I am, I'm not terribly surprised. So taking a look at the chapters that we completed, we started with Planetos, Library, Council, Confirmation, Blockade, and finally Reveal. So a series of very short chapters. I have to wonder if quality will be impacted on those words because I'm so tired today, but we'll find that out in the editing section. So that's pretty much it for day 5. I guess you will see me tomorrow with day 6.